Hi everyone, my name is Urška Umek and I welcome you to another day of our Live Yoga off the Mat Summit, where we are exploring how to tap into our inner stillness and cultivate joy, gratitude in any circumstance. And today our guest here is Lizzie Lasater. She teaches restorative yoga workshops, teacher trainings, retreats, and also offers different digital trainings like experiential anatomy, living your yoga, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and so on. And she also creates a line of spirit necklaces.
I
And
sound so busy.
and what I really love is the thing that you wrote on your website, that you teach people something radical, how to
Mhm.
relax. Really great. So welcome here today, Lizzie.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you.
So let me just ask you first how you came in contact with yoga and how you came to do what you do now.
Well, I was born into a yoga family. My mom has been teaching yoga since 1971, and she was on the early wave of Americans who went to India and studied with BKS Iyengar. So I learned from her and many others. I grew up in California, and then I moved to New York and eventually moved to Europe with my Austrian husband. And all along, I was practicing yoga and began to teach more yoga. And then I really fell in love with restorative yoga because of my own life. I was so far from home, and I had the feeling I was slipping into a depression, and I had always struggled with anxiety for many years. And Mom wrote a book about restorative yoga, and it was always available, but I never focused on it. I never took it seriously. And then a few years ago, it saved me from this very dark period where I was living in a new city. I had just completed a fancy American degree, a fancy, expensive American degree, and then moved to Europe, and I couldn't find a job. And I was just like, so I was struggling. I was really struggling. And restorative yoga became, for me, not just a way to step out of my spinning mind, but also very much so a door into meditation.
Yeah. And do you remember, like a specific aha moment that you maybe had when you started to really realize how practicing yoga, first maybe on the mat, started to show in everyday life that you lead?
Yeah, I mean, so many of them. I think that's what keeps us going back
Yeah.
to our yoga practice. But one thing I've been talking and teaching about a lot recently is that we have this idea in our culture and in our yoga community, that yoga should be delicious. And especially, I think when we go take a class or a workshop, we pay our money and then we want to get something. Like, okay, I signed up, I came here, I paid my money, now I want to get something good. Like the same feeling we have as consumers today when we buy a new iPhone, or we buy a new pair of shoes, or we go on a trip. I paid for this beautiful vacation and now I want luxury. Like I'm ready for my drink on the beach. And the thing is with yoga is that it's not quite like that. It's not so perfectly matched in that way with our very consumer, me oriented society, because embedded in this path of yoga and self discovery, as we begin to turn inward and explore the layers, the koshas, we call them, the different layers within our being, the physical layer, the energetic, the mental, there are often mountains we have to climb over, which take a lot of work and can be uncomfortable. And we have to actually go through that experience. That's the teaching of yoga, not around it. We can't pay our way out of it, upgrade our way. And we say, and there's an American fairy tale for children, and one of the lines in it is that you have to go through the woods and meet the big bad wolf in order to get to grandmother's house.
Mm-hmm.
So often today we are attracted to yoga, but we don't want to meet the big bad wolf. We just want to get to grandmother's house. And so that's a kind of long preamble to my answer to your question, which is one of the first moments when I thought, oh, this is very powerful work. The practices of yoga. This is very powerful. I remember I was 21 years old and I was doing my first teacher training as a student in Los Angeles, California at Yoga Works. And we had a Friday evening pranayama session that went very deep. And it was like I touched some kind of fire. And I remember just manipulating the breath in these simple ways was so unsettling and unleashed for me in that moment a kind of instability. I felt panicked and anxious and terrified because of all of the things I had been pushing down. The image I have is like we push these things down below our diaphragm so that we don't have to look at them. We just want them to go into the basement, emotional things and history experiences. And in that first practice, that was my first deep dive into pranayama in a formal way, other than Ujjayi pranayama that we do with the movements in Ashtanga yoga. I remember leaving, getting in my car, driving to the beach and just sitting there and crying. And I didn't really understand why. And it was very much, however, clear to me, not only that these yoga methods are so powerful and have such an ability to unlock what the doors within us that are stuck, but for me also when I was sitting in my car, looking at the beach in Los Angeles, crying, it was so clear to me that this wasn't just about my physical body or my yoga practice or what I do on the mat or the breathing exercises and practices I had just learned, but it was very much the tears were about my real life, my life off the mat, and the things that I was afraid of confronting. So I remember that as being one really strong experience where I thought, this stuff might actually work.
Yeah, usually there are these moments. It was the same for me, just after a really restorative yoga class that I went to, and it was the same, just, crying and then asking myself, why am I crying? Isn't yoga supposed to be, wow, the world is beautiful, we are all happy and everything. But it starts to really go deep, and you start to discover a lot of things. And this is actually what I wanted also to ask you, because I think that there is a notion that, especially for yoga teachers, there is this stereotype that then we are, all the time like this Zen state where, nothing bothers us, and everything is perfect, our relationships, our work and everything. So what do you think about it? And do you still get overwhelmed?
Everything. I mean, I have so many answers to that, responses to that. I once, a couple months ago, got a phone call. I had scheduled to have a talk with a studio in Holland where I was doing a workshop, and she wanted to chat about some workshop logistics. And I said, well, I'll be on my phone all afternoon. You can call me on WhatsApp. And when she caught me, I was on the way home from IKEA. And I said, well, it's a little loud because I'm on the train, but I can talk if you can hear me. And then she said, but I follow you on Instagram and I can't imagine that you go to IKEA. Like, your life is so beautiful and perfect. And I was like, of course I go to IKEA. Like, I have to do everything that normal people do. So yes, I always laugh at myself the moments when I take it as the universe kind of poking me, when the best moments are when I'm standing, my husband is an architect, and so we'll be at some design party or some event with his career, and I'll be holding a glass of wine in my grown-up clothes, not in yoga tights, and someone will ask me, oh, what do you do? And I'll be like, I teach yoga. like holding wine. I mean, these moments when it's just so the opposite of how the image we think of who we should be in the world is perfect. But I mean, the truth, or the kind of blessing that I have, the gift that I have had by growing up, by watching my mom teach yoga all of these years and practice yoga every day. She has such a consistent practice. Is that I think I've had a kind of back seat or behind the scenes view of the reality of what it is to practice yoga over decades and what it is to be in a profession. This is a profession. It's a business, like when I sign a contract to go teach a workshop, I mean, the studio has to pay their rent and they have to print the flyers and they have costs and they have all these things. I can't just, not show up and say like, oh, love and light. Like I didn't, my pranic body, my chakras weren't in a line. I didn't want to come teach, I mean, we're part of a larger industry and we need to be deeply professional. And I've seen mom model that. But what I love about seeing her in the reality of what it's like to practice yoga when you're going through grief, when her brother died, when her mother died, all kinds of things. She got a divorce. She's had health issues that normal people have in their 60s and 70s. And so I think I've seen like, oh, well, anyway, everything is going to kind of crumble and fall apart. And like, life goes on. And it's really about how we can invite our yoga practice in the broadest sense to serve us, as opposed to, I'm sorry, the light is flashing, as opposed to what I think so often we fall into the trap of believing that we are to serve our practice, that we are a slave to get on the mat every day and do 108 sun salutations or the Ashtanga first series or whatever it is we all have in our mind, 90 minutes of Ashtanga power flow, which is great on some days, but it's not right for every day. I always say, which body on which day, right? So, when I was 20 and I fell in love with Ashtanga yoga, it's like I was going to university. My parents were paying my apartment. Like I was like single. Like all I had to do was, teach a few yoga classes to buy money for gas or whatever, like in my car. I had no responsibilities, no stress. So of course I could go do yoga 2 hours a day and then come home and sit in the bathtub. Like, but now, over a decade later, and I have a husband and I have an apartment that I try to keep clean, and I have a job, and I have, aging parents, and my husband has aging parents, and that we live near, I mean, there's a lot going on. And I know, you have a kid, like women today, especially women today in the meat of our lives, 30s, 40s, 50s, it's like, I don't know why we think, it's like we let ourselves think that our practice should be one more obligation and one more should and one more effort. It's like, that's what I love about restorative yoga, is it gives back to me. And, it's like my restorative practice feeds me so that I can, like, some days that's all I do. Some days I do 20 minutes of Shavasana with all the props, super delicious, just so that I can like make it through the day, just because, my mother-in-law's coming over for dinner. And like, I've got to like get through that, etc. I like to use that example because everyone can relate, but whatever your version of your mother-in-law is.
Yeah. And when you were just talking about, just being in a restorative pose or something for 20 minutes. And it's interesting, when I mentioned before that you said it's actually a lot of times radical, for people to relax. And I think that when we do relax, this, joyful state or being grateful, it's easier for us to come up. And why do you think that it is so hard for us, or for many people to really relax,
Well, the first reason is quite simple. I think most of us are not physically comfortable. So that's why we emphasize in restorative yoga this mountain of props.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because we love props. It's because we use these props, these pillows and blankets, to put the body in a position that is deeply comfortable, the physical body. So the idea is that once your physical body is deeply comfortable, it begins to relax on its own. Your body knows how to relax. Your mind is resisting. Your emotional body is resisting. But the body itself, my hair's falling out, the body itself knows what to do when we give it a chance. So when we stop poking it by constantly, eating or moving or talking or texting or, all the things that we're doing all day long, and the external stresses we're putting on the body. I mean, it's a radical thing just to say 20 minutes with no input nowadays, like to just literally 20 minutes without your phone, without having to, what I sometimes call, be a person. Like, you don't have to make a face that's like projecting some smart, beautiful, like, self you're trying to become or trying to convince everyone that you are. So just that is huge, is like the physical body. And I think the reason why we resist is because it is difficult. It's once the physical body relaxes and we're left alone in silence with our mind, that can be a really scary place for many of us. And it can be a kind of, I love it when students say, it's a common thing people say, oh, well, I don't like Shavasana because it makes my mind spin.
Mm-hmm.
Then I always just sort of smile and say, honey, your mind's already spinning. Like, it's just Shavasana gives you a chance to look at it, which we're mostly ignoring because we're too busy doing all the things that we do all day. So I do think it's deeply radical, especially increasingly in our culture. I mean, just the concept of like on your phone, all of these alerts. So you're doing one thing, but then you're being told a second, a third, a fourth thing at the same time, like alerts from the newspaper, alerts from text messages, alerts from Instagram reminding you that Instagram is still there. Like, all of this stuff that's constantly coming in, it is deeply radical, not just to turn off all this external input, but to simply be doing one thing at a time. And the one thing that you're doing is lying here. That's it. Like, there's this great word in German, fleißig, which is like, it means like, busy and capable and doing a lot of stuff all the time. And it's a compliment,
Mm-hmm.
like, and you say it, especially like they love to say it for women, like, oh, this is a fleißiges Mädel, means like, she gets out of bed early and she does a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this voice in our head that we need to be fleißig, or whatever that word is in our language, or it's usually something that our mother said when we were kids, or our grandmother, or we hear, don't be lazy, or whatever. So we have to, first of all, get ourselves in a position of deep physical comfort, which is not easy for many of us. And that's why you have to come to my restorative workshop and learn how to use all these pillows. And then the second thing is we have to give ourselves permission on a deep level to relax. Like, give ourselves permission that we're allowed, we deserve, we have earned whatever we need to say. These 20 minutes are granted us, that we have these 20 minutes, that we're allowed, we feel safe enough in our physical environment, all these things. We have to give ourselves permission, and then we have to do the work. And sometimes it is unpleasant, sometimes it's bliss, but sometimes it is unpleasant, the work of confronting or observing the spinning mind. And it's not dissimilar, because I live in Austria, there's a lot of mountains. It was like, I don't climb a mountain because I enjoy every single step. I love the feeling when I stand on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're sweaty and you're happy and you did it. And so that's also how it is with Shavasana or restorative poses. When we spend 20 minutes in silence, there are some moments where unpleasant things may arise, or it's especially, I think, in the first few minutes, it's like the shifting the mind can be very unpleasant. Like that moment when we go from the active day into the restorative space. It's the kind of, when we change the gears, can be uncomfortable. And so that's why I always say, students either, or all of us, the most common experience is either when we lie there with no input. We either go to the past, think about something we regret or should have said or should have done, or we go to the future, think about what we need to do, what we're going to cook for dinner, blah, blah, blah. Or we fall asleep. Because falling asleep is another, of course, we're all exhausted, but it's another trick that our mind knows, oh, I can check out here if I fall asleep. So, those are the three options, really, the three main options or the fourth option is to be there in the body, in the breath, in this moment. And the teaching, what I teach is the cultivating the ability, the pathway, the practice. It's literally just that we've done it so many times of dropping down into what the yogis teach us is called the bliss body, which is there at all times. It's like this river, this deep, deep river that's this place of silence that's always in us, but we have to move through some layers before we can get there. And so it's cultivating this practice of recentering ourselves. And, restorative yoga is one methodology. I like it. But there are many other pathways in. I was just talking to a student yesterday. I'm in Munich teaching a restorative training, and one of the students came up afterward and said he doesn't have much of a yoga background, but he has a lot of qigong and martial arts background. And the things I was speaking about with restorative yoga, he was saying, oh, that's exactly in the Chinese system. They call it this. So he was hearing really a lot of similarities and matching up. So I think that there are 1,008 ways to get to this experience. And I'll just end this answer with, my definition of yoga is that it's a state and a set of practices associated with that state. So the practices are so multifaceted. The yogis are so broad. So we're interested in the state. That's the important part. We want to get to the state of yoga. And the practices are almost like a sort of menu in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. It's all these things. You could try moving your body around. You could try working with the breath. You can try sitting still. You can try bhakti yoga or karma yoga. I mean, there's a lot of it, and it's almost like it doesn't matter, which way we get into the state of yoga.
And when you were just talking about, recentering and, getting in touch with this inner state, what do you suggest, for example, just in everyday circumstances when you are, I don't know, out in a shop or doing things that you do during the day and you start to get, that feeling of overwhelm when it starts to come up? Is there some, simple technique that maybe also you use to just, stop at that moment? And
that's the hard part, is remembering when we're starting to spin out of control. That is a deeply important part of the practice. It's what I call the boomerang moment. Do you know what a boomerang is?
Yeah.
This Australian toy or kind of frisbee. So you throw it out, but then it comes back. And I call it the boomerang moment. Is the moment it turns around. So the mind is spinning, it's off and running, which is what the mind does, and that's its job. And I don't criticize. That's what my mind is good at doing. But then there's the moment where it turns around and I can come back. And it's not actually the coming back for me that's so important. It's like rehearsing, practicing, cultivating the skill of the turnaround when I can catch myself. So for me, I think that's the hardest part of it. And then there are a lot of techniques of then what you do once you realize that you're gone. And I love the breath because it's always in the present moment. And I love not the breath as a kind of abstract concept, but I love thinking about the sensations of the breath. So especially you can try it right now. And those of you watching, so go to your diaphragm, right where the lungs are divided to the belly. And take a couple breaths here. And notice the quality of your diaphragm, this muscle, which is responsible for breathing. What I notice when I'm running around and I go to the diaphragm using my breath is that there's almost always a sense of holding. And the belly is a kind of signal. So I notice there's a tightness in the belly and a holding in the diaphragm. So invite now your low belly to soften. There are no lungs in the belly, but it's all connected. So let your low belly soften and descend, push out, let go, find its natural shape. And then this frees up more space for your diaphragm to descend. And if you want to go one level deeper, this is much more subtle work. You can begin to notice that your pelvic floor is moving in concert with your diaphragm. So there is a very subtle sensation between your pubic bone and your tailbone, this musculature at the bottom of your pelvis, that is responding with every breath, if we're not holding it tight. Every time the diaphragm descends as we inhale, and every time the diaphragm lifts up as we exhale. These two surfaces are having a conversation. And I like focusing or thinking about this pelvic floor response because it's hard to find. So it immediately brings your attention deep inside. And then let your eyes blink open as you come back.
Yeah, so nice. I think that, the breath is really, sometimes I think the things that are really, simple, because sometimes I think we focus on all of these techniques that we have and, just want more and more and more of the different techniques and this and that, whether it's breath work or asanas or whatever. But I think that sometimes just this simple, practices can really go a long way.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon to use yoga to avoid yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So we can be so busy accumulating our techniques and to some extent practicing our techniques. My favorite moment like this is when I am taking a really good yoga class and I'm enjoying myself. And then I catch myself thinking, this is so good. Oh, I really like this teacher. I love this class. I'm definitely going to come next week. I should come to this class every week. And I start planning in my mind about the future yoga I'm going to do while I'm doing yoga.
Yeah, yeah.
So, the mind is very sneaky. I always say, you can't trust your mind. I mean, it's your mind is the crazy logician, the logic of the mind that says, oh, well, you've already eaten one handful of potato chips. You might as well eat the entire bag.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make sense. You're allowed to just eat one handful and move on with your day. But or whatever your thing is, chocolate chip with chocolate or, one glass of wine. Oh, I wasn't going to drink much this month and I had one glass and now I should finish the bottle. It's like, no, mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, do you have any last words or, you know, something to share with all of us?
Yes. So I encourage everyone to try Shavasana. It's this restorative Shavasana. It's really powerful. And there's a free recording. If you join my mailing list, you get sent a download of this recording of me talking you into Shavasana. So if you go to shavasana.life, www.shavasana.life, you can join. And I send out 2 emails a month about reminding us all to slow down, myself included. And I sometimes say, like, I'm obsessed with de-acceleration. So I encourage you to try it. And, it is very radical. And what I love about it is you can do it like you're so in control. You don't need anyone's permission. You can just lie down on your living room floor. One really easy setup that takes very little. You already have enough pillows at your home to do it now. It's like you can put your knees up on a couch so that your whole calves are supported by the couch, and really make sure the back of your knees are supported. Take off your shoes, make sure you're warm enough. And then I really like to wrap a blanket around my calves, like a throw blanket, something, or even if you have something heavy, if you have a yoga sandbag, that's the best. But so that the legs don't fall apart. So you're not trying to hold them together, you're just trying to keep them from falling apart. You can also use a yoga strap if you have one, or any kind of scarf or something, but warmth is also nice. So I like to wrap a blanket. And then the back of your knees are supported. You come down on your elbows and you really wiggle your lower back against the floor in a nice way. Preferably a carpet or, something soft. You have a soft surface on the ground, or a couple yoga mats. You really want it to be plush underneath you. And then take a pillow, even sort of this size couch pillow, and put it behind your head, but not just under the head, all the way down to the shoulders. Really get it snuggled in here. And then reach back and lift and extend the back of your skull so that your chin sort of slightly bows down. And then you open your arms wide, don't hold in the armpits. So open the arms wide, the palms turned up to the ceiling. You can also put a small pillow under each hand, just up to the wrist, which is really delicious, so that the wrist isn't in this, so that it goes slightly into flexion, which is interpreted as symmetry is soothing for the nervous system, and also flexion is soothing for the nervous system. So we're doing all of these things to kind of activate the parasympathetic nervous system and to wind down the sympathetic nervous system. Then you cover your eyes if you have a yoga eye bag, or you can also just use a scarf. And then you put your phone on airplane mode. And then you set a timer for 20 minutes, and you can do it by yourself. Or if you download that audio file from shavasana.yoga, you can press play, and then I talk to you for a few minutes, and then there's already built-in silence, and then me ringing my bells at the end, so you can come out. But a timer is really important, because you start to feel anxious. How long have I been here? Is it long enough? Da, 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 da. And also, I think it's really nice if you can do it when you're home alone, or sometime when it's going to be really quiet, early in the morning when the kids aren't up. And I also really like to sort of close the door, to really give yourself a space within which to drop down, which is part of what I spoke about before, like giving yourself permission to drop down into this space. And then, it's an adventure. See what happens. The good news I always say is that the physical body is much more linear. It's like if you do 10 push-ups, it's good, but if you do 20 push-ups, you're going to get stronger. It's very sort of one-to-one, the physical body and all this stuff when we think about dieting, like calories and blah, blah, blah. But the energetic body doesn't work like that. The energetic body is exponential. So even very small amounts of this type of practices, restorative practices, can have exponential effects in our lives. And what I love, I I was trained as an architect, and I used to, work as a designer and then do yoga for fun. And now I work as a yogi and I do design for fun. So there's still both parts of my life. But I think, and it's for so many of us, even if you're not a designer, we need so much creativity nowadays in our work. So what I love about getting quiet like this is that it allows me to access creativity and intuition and insight, which are on a deep layer. It's called the wisdom body in yoga, and it's that part of ourselves that already knows. Already knows that we should leave this relationship, or that we should move towns or quit this job or take this job or start a business. I mean, it's have a baby, not have a baby, like whatever, these and that knows we should write a book or we should write a poem or that we should go dancing more often, or it's like all of this deep wisdom that Mom likes to say, find that which was never lost.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so just allowing ourselves to relax, to take care of ourselves.
But don't think about relaxing. That's a scary word and it's really loaded. So I don't even use that word when I teach, and I tell my teacher trainees, like, don't say to your students relax, because it's like, just I talk about it like give myself some space, give myself some quiet, some silence, some time, some emptiness, like all these other images I think feel much less intimidating than relaxing, because people are afraid because they know it from falling asleep. If you have insomnia, how awful it is when you just lie there and you can't fall asleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to join this project.
Yeah, and I wish you a good day and all well.
Thank you.
And namaste.
Namaste.